Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have two very special guests. They come to us from the East Coast, Long Island. It's John Ray, Ray, and Lena Ajit, Ajit, excuse me. And I came across their material. I was on social media and I was watching the Occult Rejects, and they showed this press conference that took place on June 13th, 2024. And I just casually opened and looked, and it was the most extraordinary press conference I've ever seen. And it's about the Rex Heuermann LISK Gilgo Beach case, which I've covered. I covered the original bail documents that were published in 2023 after his arrest. Really incredible how he's been operating for that long. But I then reached out to them because I wanted to get a copy of their press documents just to take a look at them because the pictures and the research that they had done was so extraordinary. And then I just kind of casually asked for an interview, and here we are. And their press conference did not take place kind of in a vacuum. There was another press conference by the local DA. His name was Tierney. That was June 6th. And there were two additional charges and more material, like a 32-page. There was a superseding indictment or another bail document that went in more greater detail about what Heuermann was up to, which included some kind of document where he was listing out his crimes in great detail. And also, they found two books by John Douglas among his belongings. And one was Mindhunter. So, like this Mindhunter series, it kind of ties into what Netflix showed. And I've done some criticism about John Douglas myself. But I'm showing here, if you're watching this on YouTube, X, or Rockfin, some of the press material and some of the research that they found, this new information, which was really incredible and made me think of the show True Detective kind of right away. And I think there are ties in there and other occult ties in and stuff that I've been studying, but they can talk more about that. So, John Ray and Lena Ajit, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For people who may not have heard your name or seen the press conference, can you talk a little bit about your background? I know, John, that you are very involved in the whole LISK case, and before people knew his name. Maybe you can just go back to the beginning in 2011 and your connection leading up to what made you get the research together and put together this press conference that took place on June 13th, 2024.
Certainly. It began when I met with the mother of Shannon Gilbert, who was the one who had disappeared on May 1st in 2010. And it was the search for her that triggered the finding of the other 10 people who were murdered along Ocean Parkway and in the Gilgo Beach area of Long Island. I came in because a reporter had seen me speaking at another murder case and in court at a sentencing. And he approached me and said that he thought that this lady, Mary Gilbert, would need my help. So I met with her and the reporter in a bar restaurant over in the South Shore of Long Island, and agreed to help her to call a press conference asking that the federal authorities step in because the Suffolk County Police Department had badly botched this investigation. And so we did. We held a press conference and pointed out the bad work and asked for the feds to intervene. That was my role. That was all I was supposed to do. But instead, the police decided to have a police detective who was in the homicide part of the department investigating Shannon Gilbert. He writes a letter to me first, and then he published it himself, or the police did, in Newsday, the newspaper for Long Island. And in that letter, he said that I was all completely wrong about what I had said about Shannon Gilbert, the investigation, that he heard the 911 tape when she called in, 23-minute tape, and no one was upset on the tape. Everybody was calm. There was no threats. Nobody was in danger of anything, and it was otherwise a very bland, everyday kind of a tape is pretty much what he said, and then went on to say that I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't have the tape, but in any event, I soon learned that that letter was filled with falsehoods, outright falsehoods, which the police department eventually admitted to me. Uh, but that triggered me to go and start searching. And so I agreed with Mary I would continue in the case, and I went to the autopsy. I went to the marsh in the week when Shannon Gilbert would have disappeared in May, and under the same weather conditions and at the same time, and my team, we walked the marsh from where the police believed that Shannon had entered the marsh and then eventually was found dead, and to where she was found dead. So we did all that ourselves. And then I began to really get sucked into the case and do the work uh, pro bono for Mary. And eventually I ended up bringing a lawsuit against a man named Dr. Peter Hackett, who had called Mary Gilbert and said to her, he had introduced himself and said to her, he ran a home for wayward girls, and that Shannon was in his house. He had medicated her. She had left and promised to come back. She hadn't come back. And so he was worried about her. And he called the mother. This is a girl who was at the time, I think she was 24 years old, calls the mother and she's a sex worker, and says to the mother, "Oh, your daughter's a sex worker, and she wanted to enter my home for wayward girls, but she hasn't returned, so I'm afraid for her." And this is what he tells her. He calls her twice and tells her similar stories. Of course, it made no sense. There was no home for wayward girls, and Dr. Peter Hackett um, just made it all up. So it triggered a whole series of events that brought me in, kept me in the case, and I began to do further and further investigation. And I was able to say, finally, I have fought in court for 12 years, and I was able to finally force the police department to give up the 911 tape that they refused to disclose. And when you probably have heard of the tape, it's been across the nation, but you can hear that nobody was friendly. Nobody was at peace. Nobody was calm. Shannon had an actual physical struggle on the tape, two of them. And then in the second one, you hear her making blood-curdling screams as she runs, or right before she runs, amongst other things that the police had denied were true. And they virulently fought. They resisted the release of those tapes.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
And
so
they
that's
were initially said she drowned, right? It was an accidental drowning. Is that correct?
it's sort of correct. What happened was her jeans, pocketbook, and a few other items, personal items, her cell phone, were found in sort of a circle area behind Dr. Peter Hackett's home in the marsh. And when they found those items in December of 2011 or late November, the police commissioner at that time announced that she had drowned. They did not even yet find the body, but they just made that assumption. When her body was found, it was found in a raised area of the marsh with her head laying on a bush, face up, not face down. And of course, that, you know, how did her jeans come to be laying almost a third of a mile away from her body in a marsh, and her pocketbook? They couldn't explain any of these things, and they didn't bother to. They just said she died of some other accident, and they couldn't identify what it was. So they've taken that position throughout this whole investigation, and I've spent a lot of time to rebut it and show it's not just the wrong position, it's an absurdly wrong position. And so I've stayed at it ever since. So I've been in it since December of 2011 until now.
It's incredible how wrong they got it too, like openly wrong for years. And
Yeah,
the kind of obfuscation of helping get to the bottom of it is really something else. It's really strange how they change and then all of a sudden they set up a new task force, and that's what led to Heuermann, right?
yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Why the police were not conducting this investigation properly became obvious over time. They had a chief of police named James Burke, who was a very corrupt individual, especially when it came to sex and sex workers. He had a real predilection for them. And he gets busted in rank twice in the police department because he had solicited a sex worker and had allowed her to have his gun. and she had become his girlfriend, and he actually ended up having a child with her. And he would frequent sex workers. This was a thing that he did all, in New York City as well as in Long Island. And he was otherwise, in many other ways, very corrupt man. So when some drug addict broke into his car, just a happenstance, and allegedly found porno tapes or discs in his duffel bag in the car and stole them. He went to that fellow, that his name was Christopher Loeb. He went to that fellow in the 4th precinct where he was being held and beat him up for what he had found. And as a result of that, he tried to cover up the assault. The district attorney who appointed him, or helped to get him appointed rather, as police commissioner, a guy named Thomas Spoda, both get arrested because they're doing everything they can do to cover up the Burke behavior. And it was Spoda's chief assistant who also did so, a fellow named McPartland. And the result was they went to jail. All 3 of them ended up in jail, in one way or another. So, Loeb was in jail, and for what had happened with the car. Spoda ends up in jail for the cover-up along with McPartland. And Burke eventually goes to jail for doing the assault and then covering it up. So the police department was rotted from the bottom up, because Burke gets promoted to be chief of police with that kind of a background I told you, and another background that was even worse. And that was that he was a member of a group of young boys in the Smithtown area in Suffolk County who these boys captured a young kid who was riding a bicycle through a schoolyard. And because they didn't like him for one reason or another, there's all different reasons given, they knocked him over and then took rocks and pushed him down his throat and killed him. And Burke was part of that group, although we don't know if he was ever really there that night when this happened. He testifies against the group and gets them all indicted. And so his reward was that the chief prosecutor who was on that case was Thomas Spoda. And so Burke joins the police force, Suffolk County, and works his way up as a cadet and then eventually as a cop all the way up the ranks. Now, you mean to tell me that it was only Spoda who was by then a defense attorney when Burke starts his climb, that it was only Spoda who promoted him? No, there had to have been other police members who were similarly situated who helped him rise. And we know, it's a digression of sorts, but we know that Burke and a whole group of police members and firemen too, and various other walks of life, would regularly solicit prostitutes together, would regularly go to certain bars and clubs for that purpose. And in every way, top to bottom, they were corrupted. Burke was actually a crack smoker, along with the girlfriend, who I ended up becoming her lawyer. So I know firsthand what went on in a house that he owned in Ronkonkoma, where he was allowing a woman who lived with him to run a sex ring, and out of in those days beeper phones, and out of this house in Ronkonkoma. And that's where Burke would go with the other girl that he was a sex worker that he met on the street in Amityville, and smoke crack. And he was incredible story, isn't it? And this guy was promoted. He was given an award by Spoda for being a great cop as a chief of police. It's just a stunning story. But they did everything they could to suppress the investigation of Shannon Gilbert and of the Gilgo Beach women and the baby who was killed and the Asian male. They did everything they could to suppress it. They told the FBI, they told them, get out, you're not in it. They refused their help. The New York State Police Department, the New York City Police Department, the Nassau County Police Department, where 2 of the girls were found in Nassau County, all suppressed. Everything came to Burke. And I fought a system from 2011 on until the task force finally sprung into being in 2022, I believe. Up until then, they had one detective part-time working on the case, and
It's incredible.
yeah, so they did it. They crushed this investigation, and many of those people, or several of them anyway, are still there. They're still responsible for working on this case. So
It's just incredible with all these deaths and the information that they had, that they, I mean, how many other people did Heuermann kill? So Heuermann is operating in this environment of corruption. Did you ever find any evidence or overlap between that? Because all of his victims, or a lot of them, are sex workers as well. So Burke and his crew are doing the same type of stuff. And it looks like from the evidence that's being collected about Heuermann, he was in the BDSM kind of sex worker environment in Long Island and Manhattan. Did you see any overlap between the corrupt police, like with Burke or under Burke and Heuermann?
I believe we have seen that I can say that only in a general way, that we know that Heuermann frequented BDSM bars in New York City as well as on Long Island, and he frequented other, exotic dancer places, places like that. There were sex places, and in that frequency, he actually, we have eyewitnesses who saw him connected with various officials in these bars, and other prominent people, such as one who was suspected for a long time named James Bissett. And so Bissett, Heuermann, others, they would spend time in these places, which, by the way, according to the dancers I've spoken to and some of the BDSM women whom I've spoken with, Heuermann would frequent those places. He would be there. They'd see him, and
those are stories. Like, there was one witness, I think, who saw him, who was a sex worker, and then they tried to burn him for $1,000, if I remember that story. And he was driving a big car, like an Avalanche or something like that. But he was around, so he was like in that environs, of the stripper, sex worker, BDSM. And this is one thing that study you mentioned in the press conference was Pandora's Box in Manhattan, and there it is. And these have all kinds of dungeon rooms and stuff like that you can rent out. So he was part of that nighttime group. And you sent me an affidavit, Lena, of also like another story of him using drugs. Like, so he kind of overlaps with Burke, using cocaine at night and with women. It's really something else.
Yeah, there's even sort of like a tangential, it's not concrete connection, perhaps, between the Burke crowd and Heuermann. He told you about the woman with whom Heuermann was running an escort ring out of a house in Ronkonkoma. That woman ended up in a small town in Rhode Island, and Heuermann just so happens to have an apartment about a 1-minute drive from her place in Rhode Island. So what are the chances of that?
Wow, that's incredible.
Well, one of the interesting things is there's so many things where you'd have to use that sentence. What are the chances of that? In this case, where all these coincidences, I've never seen so many in my lifetime of 41 years of practicing law, that there can be so many coincidences as here. And of course, you have to imagine some of them are just not really coincidences at all. But they need more investigation. They needed a great deal more investigation. This is just a tip.
And you had a very well-renowned expert into kind of serial killing. His name is Brancato, is that correct? Who
Yes,
kind of Brucato, Brucato, who wrote a book called The New Evil: Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. But he was in the press conference saying that these are crimes and things that have been going, or the first crime, I think, was 1993. So what has been Heuermann doing? He's been moving around, and the new kind of body remains were in a different part away from Gilgo Beach, right? They were in some other wooded area.
North Sea.
Manorville, is that right?
Yes, Manorville, and as Lena said,
North Sea, and that's
North Sea.
kind of by the Hamptons area.
Okay, North Sea.
And other places as well. There's part of it, one body who is known as Peaches because of a Peaches tattoo. Her remains are found in Hempstead Lake State Park. Karen Vergata, her remains are found in other places as well on Long Island. Fire Island, yeah, her legs floated up in Fire Island, and not all of her body has been found. Many of them, not all of their bodies have been found, or all the parts of their bodies, I mean to say. Gary Ricotta is a very well-renowned expert in this nation on serial killing, and he was there at the press conference to kind of explain in general what the characteristics of a serial killer would be, and whether or not the different things, aspects of what we encounter with the Heuermanns and in their various behaviors are in any way related one to another, or again to the murders. And his job was to really pretty much explain that, not to pin somebody down and say, aha, this person did that, this person did this. That's not why he was there, but he was very helpful.
Right, and kind of what was you've been involved in this case for over a decade. What was the real reason you put together the press conference on June 13th? You have new information, correct?
Yes. Lena, who's an expert technician, was able to working together with myself and our team, was able to basically get into Victoria Heuermann's sites that she was looking at, social media that she was looking at. And you have to remember that up until we held that press conference, just a little while ago, up until that time, the district attorney and the task force had been saying these things. Rex Heuermann, until then, was believed to have acted alone in the killings, and that he was leading a double life. And then concomitantly, they said words to the effect that the family of Heuermann has alibis for the various murders that they discovered, and so they're not involved in the case. I never believed that. I had plenty of reason not to believe that, and I think that that is a very premature and fairly extreme decision to have made under these circumstances, especially when Victoria Heuermann's hair was found on the outer skull of one of the victims, and Åsa Ellerup, the mother, the wife of Rex Heuermann, her hair was found on the skull, exterior skull of another victim, and another hair was found at the base when they found the Gilgo Four, as they were called, who were kind of lined up in a row and covered with a burlap substance. So under those circumstances, it's rather difficult to believe that you could just write these people off as not being involved. I don't care how much evidence you have one way or the other.
And all that information, the hairs and everything, is in the original bail documents after his original arrest in 2023, correct? So it's all something that's already been disclosed by the authorities, right?
Yeah,
Right.
and it's doubled down too on the latest bail application too. They have a graphic where they lay out all of the hairs on which are found on each of the victims. On Amber Costello, Victoria Heuermann's hair was found. Megan Waterman, it was Rex's hair. Also Asa's hair on Megan Waterman. 2 of her hairs, 1 of Rex's. And then Maureen Brainerd Barnes, again, it was Asa's hair. On Jessica Taylor, they found Rex Heuermann's hair. And Rex Heuermann's hair, as well as what we believe to be the ex-wife's hair on Sandra Castilla. So equally as many hairs of Åsa Ellerup as there are of Rex Heuermann.
Wow.
We don't want to be critical of Ray Tierney and his work. He's done great work, and so has the FBI and this team in doing DNA work and technological work in breaking into the various electronic devices that Heuermann had. He had hundreds of electronic devices in his home, in this teeny weeny home of 1,343 square feet. And it will still take months for the authorities to break in and research and so forth, what's there. So they did a great job. You can't deny it on the arrests that they've made and on the research that they've done so far. We just disagree with them on the conclusions that they reached regarding the rest of the picture here, the Heuermanns and Shannon Gilbert. So,
Isn't it true that they believe, or the allegation is, I mean, some of these allegations haven't been proven in court, but the allegation is that he committed one of the murders at that home, at that small little home?
there hasn't been a dispositive statement that I'm aware of that any of the murders were committed in the home, but the inference is very strong, and that comes because after the police had been into the home in the first round of arrests, or an arrest in July of last year, another almost year goes by, and they go back in March to revisit the same home and take out a whole bunch of new things. So, the inference is pretty clear. I think that they believe that something happened in that home that wasn't only his indulgence in literally hundreds of sex workers that he had in his home and other places. By the way, when the police went in on the second warrant in March of this year, cadaver dogs were present, and the medical examiner from Nassau County and the one from Suffolk County were present. Those people deal in dead bodies, as does the dog. So they were looking for real flesh or the remnants of flesh of some kind in that house. So that's, I don't know, they're not telling everybody anything very much other than what you see in their applications. So you kind of have to guess at that.
But you saw, I mean, according to the information in your press conference, they had like very graphic kind of almost medical pictures and things like that of corpses on their coffee table, right?
Yes, there's a book that was published in the 1930s or so, that round about that time, by a detective named Jack Huddleston, who was a detective in California, I believe Southern California, and he had photographed all of these different horrifying deaths, including the dismemberment of sex workers and the dismemberment of others, women cut in half, things of that nature, horrifying destruction of human faces and the like. And he takes this book, and it seems for no other reason than titillation, because he makes these wry little obnoxious comments on some of the pictures, and he puts them together in a book. And then you see some of them there when you went right there, and then published this book. The interesting part about this book is not necessarily only the horrifying pictures, and that the book was on the table when in the kitchen when the police entered the home on the second warrant in March, when Victoria Heuermann was home alone. She's 27 years old, but the mother had left just the night before. Well, what's more interesting, or maybe equally interesting anyway, about the book is that we worked hard to we finally got copies of the book. It was not easy to get. And that's because it became a sort of a very popular avant-garde type book for cults and people who practice worship of Satan and that sort of thing. This is not their Bible, but it's maybe it's equivalent to St. Paul's letters of that side of the world, the dark world, and this becomes not only very popular, but Anton LaVey, who was the head of the Church of Satan in America, they made a movie out of this book in 1989. Then they revised it in 1992 and again in 1993. And he is the narrator.
Wow.
In the book. So it became a cult book to be possessed by people who are in cults. So it makes that a very interesting new development.
That's amazing. I just did an interview with somebody about the Hand of Death on Friday, and we brought up LaVey and his ties to serial killers. There's another one named Creech, who was like a hitman and a serial killer who met with Anton LaVey. And it's Richard Richard Ramirez as well.
Yeah.
So there is a correlation, and that full title of that book is Death Scenes, a Homicide Detective Scrapbook. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct.
Very graphic. Wow.
Yeah, that's horrible.
So that was one of the things, but also this is a picture of the daughter, right? And she kind of came out after he was arrested, looking kind of like dressed like a schoolgirl with a backpack or something like that,
Mhm.
but may not. And there's evidence that her and her mom scrubbed their entire social media or tried to scrub everything. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So Victoria Heuermann, I know for a fact that she had an Instagram and an art page that you were showing us earlier. Obviously, both of them are down, and all that we really have are internet archive crawls of it. So it's pretty hard to see what was posted on those pages. But yeah, I know for certain her Instagram and the art page were taken down. And then as for Asa, I believe she had a Facebook. I know some of the earlier pictures that were coming out when Rex was first arrested, they were taken from her Facebook of her. That's certainly down now too. She does have a Twitter left up. Her handle is actually called Elven Maiden. And if you peruse her following list, you'll see she is also very preoccupied with horror writers and Comic-Con, people who, like the daughter being a furry doesn't necessarily seem to be anomalous in the family. Perhaps the wife is into it too.
Gotcha. So, like, do you have affidavits too that kind of indicate the family was involved in this type of lifestyle, though, that they were in the kind of swingers? Is that would that be acceptable, or is that right? Or is that
You would be right, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But if you take a look at those two pictures that you have up there, you can see the picture with Victoria in the schoolgirl's kind of outfit with a school bag over her. That's the picture that's the first time she showed herself openly to the media, and of course she has a little bun on her hair, and she looks very sedate and girlish, even schoolgirlish. But the other picture is also Victoria, and that's the Victoria that Victoria herself portrayed on the internet. And she's she's very different being than what you see in the first picture. And you have a right to be whatever you want. You can change yourself, as she obviously did, from one costume to another as you see fit. I mean, you could be a goth, you could do whatever you like. It's free country. But the fact that she attempted to portray herself as this little girl in the beginning, when that's not who she was at all, suggests that she has some reason to hide something, or she's trying to fool somebody. And you don't do that if you're the innocent child of a serial killer that you didn't know anything about.
right? Living in a 1,400-foot house in Massapequa, where he's coming and going. He's obviously missing at night, according to all these affidavits. He's not going to bed at 9 o'clock, and he's not. And you said he's a hunter too, so that's kind of the tie-in with the burlap bag. They found 300 guns there, and just like he's at hunting clubs too, right? So there's a
the district attorney himself admitted that Heuermann was having hundreds of connections with sex workers, hundreds. Now, before he did that, I held a press conference back when all this first developed, and I pointed out that I had a witness who called me at length. I interviewed her for several hours, who was a sex worker and had visited Heuermann about 20 times at his Massapequa Park home and serviced him, along with other sex workers very often. And she was even able to tell of an incident where Mrs. Heuermann came running out of the house screaming, angry at the girls as they were getting into a taxi cab, because one of them had allegedly stolen her iron. And they then had to take the girls out of the car, search the car. And of course, they hadn't taken the iron, and off she went. But she was there when all this is going on in the daytime. This was during the daytime when that happened, I think, that one. And this woman was able to say that he was a regular at her agency, what they call an agency, which is a sex trafficking organization. And he was a regular. And he would hire hundreds of these sex workers, according to her. And then I took a lot of heat for saying that. I was called a liar, and I made all that up. And then Ray Tierney now confirms that he would have hundreds of sex workers. Now, they were at the house, and this sex worker told me that the children were present when that happened. So I don't know their ages. At the time, I don't know. But something very demonic is going on in that family and in that house. And the house itself even speaks that. But
and you even stated in the press conference that after the murders, they stayed in the house. They didn't flee the house like it was the Amityville Horror or something like that.
No, they didn't flee the house at all. They stayed there, and it's a teeny weeny little house, and it's all filled with junk. And she was apparently a hoarder, so there was junk all over the place and things, So it wasn't an easy place to live in. We also have some evidence that other people live there besides the Heuermann family. For example, the brother, he listed it as his residence right up until recently. So
interesting.
It's there's more to that place than meets the eye as well. And we have one witness who came forward. You asked about the swingers, and she had a really interesting story. And I vetted her with the police after she told the story and gave me an affidavit. And she says that she had a detective who was a narcotics detective in Brooklyn and as a boyfriend. And when holidays came, they would go out celebrating by going to swingers places, including La Trapeze in New York City, which was an infamous place for swingers. Very large, by the way, very largely frequented by police officers. And according to her and according to another woman I know who actually worked there. So, any event, she goes with this police detective out to Massapequa Park to have a swinging session with Heuermann and his wife. However, they bring along, and she doesn't remember why. She's a little vague about why. I mean, we're going back 30 years, and she was using cocaine and so on at the time. So, not everything is crisp and perfect in her memory, but there was a girl that they brought with them. She doesn't know why the girl was brought, but she remembers she was brought with them. And she sat in the back seat of the car, and she noticed, the witness noticed that this girl was bent over and sideways in the back, and she seemed in a very awkward position. And that became significant. And it turns out that girl appears to have been Karen Vergata, one of the victims. So they get to the house and they go in to, do their thing. And Heuermann, the detective disappears downstairs with Heuermann. The wife remains upstairs, serves the witness a drink, and when the witness says, do you want to have sex, she turns it down. And the witness, who was African American, thought that she was turned down because she was African American. It wasn't spoken that way. She just thought that. And so, all right, she left it alone. But then she became upset because her boyfriend didn't appear for a long time. He disappeared and didn't come back. Finally, they decide to leave. And Vergata's gone. They don't see her at the moment. And they leave. And while they're in the car, one of the things she remembered was that they left in a different car than they came in, which would infer that the detective knew Heuermann before.
Wow.
So he had left behind, oddly enough, his belt. And while they get in the car and she's saying to him, hey, why don't you go get your belt? Vergata appears in the window, the front window of the house, and she's kind of pressed up against the glass, and she's upset looking. And now, people since then have said, oh, there's no front window that could have happened in. That's a made-up story. When you actually look at that house and you look at some of the windows, two of those windows are up high, right below the eave of the roof as it comes down. And that they match with, at least with the description that the witness gave of the kind of window, because there's another set of windows in the front of the house as well, the small windows. I don't know what window she was looking out of, but according to the witness, she was looking out a window. And the witness became upset that they were leaving this girl behind. She was cold. It was around on or around Valentine's Day. She doesn't remember exactly whether it was Valentine's Day or not, but it was cold, and she was hungry and she was dirty. And so the witness told her, when you get there, make sure you take a shower. They'll let you take a shower. And we don't know if she did or not, but she remembered all these things, and she remembered that. She even remembered some of the decorations that were in the room that she was sitting in. Apparently, maybe the living room. Hard to tell.
Wow.
But
And so.
what happens is Heuermann goes out in the backyard. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and he's got this big barrel, and he starts a fire in the barrel. And she never knew why. And she tells her boyfriend, shouldn't we stay? And the boyfriend says, no, they're playing a game. Don't worry. Everything's cool. With that, Regatta runs naked out onto the front lawn, if you could call it, in February, and looks very upset. So they drive away, and it really upset the witness, and she never forgot it, that they left this girl behind and didn't understand why. And then when she's watching TV and Regatta's picture is shown as one of the victims, she recognized her and said, that's her. It turns out that Regatta had a car accident before this all happened that caused her to have a very serious back injury so that she would lean over. So this woman wouldn't have known that. The witness would have had no way of knowing that. And yet apparently the girl was pregnant at the time. So, I mean, I more than that, I don't know, but her indications seem to match reality that this really happened. But
wow, that's incredible. And that's a 1996 case for Regatta is, right? Like it goes way almost 30 years ago. It's incredible.
And hearing this now, it actually reminds me of part of one of the latest bail documents where Heuermann is actually listing his supplies, and he lists a burn can. There's no way this witness could have, preemptively known about that,
Right. They found in this new bail document that there was a deleted file that Heuermann put together that really went in detail about his they called it a blueprint for murder or something like that. So he would go in detail about the things to do right and his next kill. So he had was plotting and planning these out with details and implements and things like that, if I remember right. But yeah, so really graphic.
By the way, an interesting and ironic point is that when we couldn't explain and the witness couldn't explain why Heuermann's wife turned down the sex, her lawyer in this case now, named Robert Macedonio, went on national TV and explained it. Ironically, he said she would never have sex with somebody. She was pregnant. And sure enough, we figured out the months, and sure enough, she would have been pregnant at that time, as he said. Well, I guess you need to ask the nation's women, can you have sex when you're pregnant? I think we know the answer to that. But she didn't want to have sex because she was pregnant. Makes a lot of sense. And it explains exactly what the witness was claiming.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And for people who don't know, Heuermann's wife is from Iceland, and they have a boy and a girl, right? That are, I think, around 27, 29 right now.
Well,
something like that.
Boy is not Heuermann's. That's his stepson.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So that's her son from another marriage. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then he has a brother too, and they both have property in North or South Carolina as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's all sorts of unlisted apartments as well. If you sort of trace where he's been through his emails and his phone numbers, there's a lot of different, apartments all throughout the country. There's timeshares in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of properties out there that he might not necessarily own, but he certainly frequents.
I was on another show where I said that he owned properties because I'd seen the word properties on my little list. And and I went off on the properties. Macedonia went on to another show and said, aha, Mr. Ray's making up stories. He didn't own the properties. And that's literally true. I was in error in using the word own. He possessed these properties. He used them in various ways in a large number of states where the police in those states are beginning to look to see whether or not some of their missing persons who were murdered match up with him. And now we've just had somebody come forward from the state of Florida who actually encountered Rex Heuermann in Florida. And I interviewed her at length. So I've interviewed 2 women from Virginia that who were pursued by him, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, upstate New York City, and Florida. And there may have been somebody from Oklahoma, but originally from New York, all of whom encountered him and were either stalked by him or did something. He did something to them or against them. In Philadelphia, yeah. So, and there's a list. I don't have the list right here, but it's Michigan and so on. There are other places. There's a place in Illinois. I'm sorry. There's a place in Nevada, in Las Vegas, where a woman from a very small, petite, pretty woman from Long Island, and that's the characteristic of most of these girls that he's killed.
Mm-hmm. Lindsay Marie Harris. She was born in Smithtown, Long Island. She moved upstate, and she goes out to Henderson, Nevada, I believe, and she engages in sex work, to the best of my knowledge. She goes missing, and part of her dismembered body is then found in Springfield, Illinois. And of course, when the police are searching the Heuermann home and they're removing items from the home, they are taking out an image of a battered blonde woman who looks nearly identical to Lindsay Marie Harris. And of course, Heuermann's timeshare in Las Vegas is so close to where Lindsay Marie Harris was living at the time. And he also uses a username called Springfield Man. So there's a lot of little details that match up to it. And I believe in news stories too, local police in Las Vegas and Henderson are talking about trying to connect Heuermann to Lindsay Marie Harris's murder as well.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, they think that he started sometime in the 90s. If these are dead, that means he's got 30 years of his brutal campaign. Like, and real, he's a very distinctive looking guy. Like, he's very big. He seems to wear specialized clothes. Mm-hmm. Somebody called him an ogre, if I remember. Like, he had ogre kind of features.
He possibly could go back into the 1980s.
Wow, that's incredible. So, but you found like weird overlaps, not only this kind of physical evidence, but just the online evidence that, circumstantial though it is, it does indicate similar tastes with Rex, which are like, he seemed to like BDSM, like the torture. Even I think they found on the original bail documents that I read from 2023, some of the porn stuff that he was looking at was like torture, like, people crying and like horrible stuff, right? So kind of overlaps.
Very horrible. And the things that Victoria was looking at, the sites that she was going on, we showed at the press conference some of the pictures from those sites, and we read some of the words that were published on those sites these are BDSM to the max. They're extreme, and that's the reason the word cannibalism came up, because 2 of those pictures, at least 2, there may have been others, one of them depicted a sort of over human flesh as people sat around to eat it. And the other picture was of a human body that was stripped of opened up, basically ripped open and stripped everything but its innards. And it was talking about how great it was to eat human flesh and so forth on the site. So cannibalism was observed, and knowing what we now know, I don't see any strong reason to suggest that at least cannibalism should be investigated here.
Wow, that's really intense. And you kept using this word. In my mind, I heard hardcore, but you were saying the right word. I just didn't hear it right. You were saying hard vor with a V, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a specific, this is new to me. I guess I'm young, so I should know about it, but I guess I don't run in these particular circles. But yeah, hard vor, I suppose, is where the fetishist has a fetish for like literally to be consumed or to consume a person to the point of mutilation and death. So it really is cannibalism.
Wow, it's crazy. And that her Victoria's name was Vin and de Matur, which could be, and it's in Icelandic, right? But I was tinkering around with it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, according to somebody we know who's familiar with Scandinavian languages, it translates to winning food tour. So another sort of dark, perhaps, reference to cannibalism.
We don't know if it is or if it isn't. You know, the people who object to us, they always catch something we say where we say it could be this, and then they say we said it was this. Well, no, we didn't say that. But certainly, that it, like so much of this, it needs to be investigated.
Right. There's enough here to investigate it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at this, it's these links are all to like really dark things. We talked this about in the pre-show, and I spoke to you about it, Lena. But this tie into the smiley face killers, which I've done way too much research. But like 50 to 100 of the bodies have been found without a shoe. Like it's a distinctive characteristic. It's not even the shoes missing. The person is missing, and a shoe is found, and then the person is found without that shoe. Like it's happened 50 or 100 times. I can make a list, but it ties into this picture that you guys showed on the press conference, and it really, like, I audibly gasped. I went, when you guys mentioned that, I was like, whoa, this is incredible.
Yeah, if you could see the person in the foreground, the shoe was missing. And when Miss Castillo was found, she was found with one shoe missing.
Wow, it's incredible.
And I think we've talked about this, William, but more largely what the police consider to be a signature of Bitroff is the shoe removed, which is why Sandra Castillo's murder for so long, according to the police, was considered a Bitroff murder.
Can you explain who Bitroff was? I mean, because this is an even bigger environment. So you've got Heuermann, Burke, and then this other guy, Bitroff, or whatever his last name is. Can you explain him and what they thought that one of the murders, like you said, was his or Heuermann's? Was the other person? Can you explain that more, please?
Well, I'll start, and then Lena can back me up. John Bitroff was a carpenter who lived in Manorville, where these girls some of the girls were found. Their trunks anyway were found. And he was found guilty of murdering 2 sex workers because they found his semen in both of them. And there were wood chips around their bodies. He was a carpenter. So he went to trial. He lost, and he's appealing that trial right now as we speak. And he's in jail. But there were those who said Bitroff was the killer of some of these other girls as well in Manorville, because it made some sense geographically that was true. And, nobody knew for sure, but now we know that, at least as to one girl who it was speculated, I think by the police, but certainly by the public, that Miss Castillo was a victim of Bitroff, because she was found in the North Sea, which is a portion of the 2 forks of Long Island going out east into the water. And the tip of one of the pieces of the fork, the southern fork, is a little forest in an area, and it's on the water, and that's where she was found. So everybody thought, oh, it's Bitroff did that one too, but they tested her DNA against Bitroff, and it didn't match, I think, is what happened. But now it turns out it was Heuermann who did the killing. So
the North Sea is far east on Long Island. Is that correct? Kind of the far eastern area?
Okay. So yeah. And it's not quite out as far as Southampton, but it's on its way. It's in the town of Southampton. And Bitroff is currently appealing. And I read the Legal Aid Society did the brief for him. Legal Aid is, it's public funding. you get a free lawyer. And they did a fabulous job on the brief that they submitted. So I think it has a reasonable chance of success in the appellate division. I'm not saying that he's not guilty, and I'm not saying he was. I don't know enough to say so. But, from a lawyer's point of view, it's good legal work. So we'll see.
Mhm.
Right.
So the perception that all of the killings were done in Gilgo Beach, which is, if you're watching this on the screen, you can kind of see it here. He was in Massapequa, I believe. So close to him. The perception that all in Gilgo Beach, would you say that's not correct, considering the new sites where bodies were found?
Yeah, that's not correct. There's some, of course, along Ocean Parkway, and it's not just Gilgo Beach. It's the whole run along Ocean Parkway from Oak Beach, which is where Shannon was found, along going west to Nassau County, all staying on the Ocean Parkway run,
Gotcha.
the marsh on that.
And that's like five or 10 miles, maybe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. It is so wild, this whole story. I mean, do you think, kind of just listening to your great analysis of the case, do you think that he intentionally kind of inserted himself into the police environment to forestall or kind of evade capture?
You mean Heuermann?
Yeah, Heuermann.
Yeah, not only that, we have a taxi cab driver who came forward who was vetted thoroughly by myself and in conjunction with Rodney Harrison, the commissioner of police. And Rodney and I met with this woman for almost 2 hours, interviewed her. She turned out to be quite credible. She had no skin in the game whatsoever. And she was able to say that, I forget what you asked now. I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I was just saying that, like, it seems like some of these other killers and people, they subvert police activity or try to deflect things or integrate them into the police to avoid capture. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, you should check out this Bill Trough guy or something.
What she noticed was that he was wearing when she met Heuermann for the second time, and he was in her cab. He was wearing one of these lanyards with a placard of some kind on it that made him look like a police officer. And indeed, when she spoke to the police officer who was called in to the site where she met Heuermann, she stopped the cop and said to him, one of yours is back there having a bad night. You better go, help him out. So he does pose as a police officer. And by the way, I have now, let's see, we have 4 different people who have identified Heuermann, eyewitnesses who encountered him with a gun, with a handgun. So he was perfectly capable of using a handgun. One of those witnesses, very credible woman, who was a sex worker at one time, she's shot by him, and the bullet misses and goes through her neck, along the back of her neck, and leaves a scar you can still see very clearly there across the neck. So he was perfectly capable of using all kinds of weapons. He had over 300 different kinds of guns, including these pistols. So he did pose himself that way. He made himself look like that.
Like a cop. Do you feel like he had more money than his job allowed for? Like there was some secret form of income or something that was under the table? Did you ever get that impression?
It's not an impression; it's a fact. We know, we've seen tax records and the like of his income. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we pulled all of his Department of Business permit applications that were approved, I think from like 2014 to 2024. And he had major contracts. I mean, there's a pretty public news story about how he had a contract in one of Trump's buildings. He had voluminous projects. He worked for the Catholic Church on a lot of projects, big, massive expediting and architectural products. It would have been a multi-million-dollar business. But actually what's interesting is then if it's this multi-million-dollar business, why does he live in this ramshackle little hut in Massapequa Park? It's completely run down. So this is a guy who's very successful. He has a lot of different projects going on with big employers. It's actually interesting. It's like, where is all that money going?
It's also equally interesting that he's willfully, virtually, you might say, he's willfully leaving his house in a disgraceful, ugly condition, which comports with his, an emanation of himself and the people around him, what they're doing or what they are, as it may be. But there, we say that the victims are self-evident. They're the dead. They're the immediate, horrifyingly sad, tortured victims that he took their lives and did worse. In cutting them up, maybe cutting them up while they were still alive. I think there's some belief in that. Terrible, terrible things like that. Those are the victims. Their families are the secondary victims, that they had, the loss of their sister or the child. Those are the secondary. The real families, the relatives, the real relatives, they are the victims, the secondary victims. The one person who's not a victim of any of those kinds of acts is Victoria Heuermann, 27-year-old Victoria Heuermann. And there's a whole group of people who go on the internet and go around saying, "Oh, she's a victim, and we need to respect her and treat her, as a victim, because she had a terrible life growing up with her father, and she's innocent. How dare you touch or talk about her?" That group is actually urging an absurdity, a legal and actual absurdity. The evidence is overwhelming that this girl undoubtedly was a victim of her family for sure. So in that respect, I agree with those people, because she was raised to be what she is now by them, by her family. But at some point, something happened. We don't know exactly what it is, but things developed, shall we say. And now we have this person who goes to work with her father every day, is at home with him during all these sexual trysts and the like, and worse, potentially anyway, who, after all these things happened, she wasn't chopped up, she wasn't murdered, she didn't face the horrors of all of that. She's survived her father. She's with and survived him, supported him, and she's with him. She and her mother are showing up in court to support him, saying, "Oh, well, we're just here to see what the evidence will prove to us." What?
Right. Like, why, if they were really against him, why don't they come out and make a full affidavit like the other affidavits you have, right?
Right. And indeed, they do everything to cover up what's going on. Showing them, she shows herself as a little schoolgirl when she's not. She's wipes out her internet, washes it. She's looking at all these horrifying things when her father is doing all these things, and maybe more. Maybe we don't even know the full extent yet of the various murders. And she's there all along doing this. And she goes out and just like every innocent person, as soon as this happens, what does she do? She gets a lawyer. Excuse me, but innocent people, I was being ironic and facetious, they do not run out and get lawyers when they're totally innocent. But she did. So did her mother. It was one of the very first things they did. And furthermore, she has never come forward to talk about the case, except she and her mother, with the help of their lawyers, got a contract for over $1.1 million for her to be filmed as the case progresses up through the trial of Rex Heuermann.
Wow. I didn't know that. Do you know what company or what outfit is paid her that money?
Peacock is paying for that. And her lawyer received allegedly $200,000 for his work, which is clearly a conflict of interest, but nobody's noticed that yet. And the other lawyer has received $400,000. same thing, same problem.
Oh no, that's terrible news because a lot of my shows have been about this kind of innocence fraud and these documentaries that do a terrible job, like whatever the West Memphis Three.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go through the list; they're almost all terrible, and the people are the victims. You know, they flip the victims. Whether it's, I mean, we can go into that's a whole nother show, but it sounds like that's what they're setting up for this.
Yeah, there's a plethora of other evidences and the like, circumstantial evidence that suggests that this whole matter of the involvement of the family of Heuermann be investigated further. It's just inescapably so when you consider what we know now. And this is a girl who stands by her father when the evidence is overwhelming as to what he is. You don't need a court of law to tell you that. You live with him. You know what he's like. You know what he did.
How many? What do you think? What's your guess at how many total victims he has? I bet it's much higher.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take a stab at it?
We don't know. I wouldn't even take there's all kinds of speculation from various people about how many there could be. I don't know. I mean, Virginia alone, I have 2 witnesses who were stalked by him, and luckily they lived to tell the tale. But there's an awful lot of dead people in Virginia who cannot be explained.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, But this guy, he was ferocious in what he did. And when I talk to the witnesses that we have, he was always ferocious, raging person. Very likable, very gregarious, very cheerful at first. And then the other Heuermann came out. Now, did he act alone? That's a big question here. I don't think he did, but that's just a guess right now, based on what I know, or a speculation, shall we say? Right. But back to the finish on Victoria. Victoria Heuermann is no person to be counted as a victim equal to the real victims of this case. And that's an extremely important distinction, because at some point, just like every one of us have made choices as we grew up, with our parents notwithstanding, we've made choices that said, most of us have, we broke with our parents at some age and said, we're going to do things our way, or go our own life. It's as old as the hills, the story of independence and growing up. She is not broken with her parents. She is not broken with her father. She's taking money like a ghoul, eating on the dead. That's what she's doing. She is no victim in under those circumstances. She's forfeited any right to claim she's a victim under those circumstances. And that's, a hard and fast position on that.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. Do you guys have time for a few questions?
Sure.
Desert Rain asks, has Mr. Ray looked at Asa's sister, Johanna, and her cult interest in self-published murder novels?
I have. I've read them. They're poor novels, really bad. Quality sucks. But the fact that Johanna lived a few blocks away, and when she was first met by a reporter at the door right after Rex was arraigned on July 14th of last year, a young reporter went over, knocked on her door, and she acted with complete amazement. What? Not upsetment, but amazement. And she I think she lives with their father. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure, but her reaction was not apropos. Mm-hmm. And I don't know more than that, but
do you know how Heuermann and Asa from Iceland met? Did they meet online? Was that how they? I mean, was that too early? I guess was it 95? I don't know.
I don't think we have any information on that. I've been very curious about that myself. I do have a question for you, William. I know you've been looking to Heuermann. Have you looked at all into his family connections, like his cousins and his uncles?
No. What's there? Do you know anything about it?
So I believe it's his first cousin, Kenneth Heuermann. He is actually a satanic ritual abuse perpetrator. He was a Lutheran pastor in Camillus, New York. There's actually a pretty recent lawsuit. I can send you the link afterwards, but you can pull it up in New York e-courts too. But the cousin's name is Kenneth Heuermann. Some of the allegations made by the child victim, she was about 8 to 11 years old. Some of the accusations are that she was like stripped nude, placed sacrificially upon a church altar where they performed various satanic rituals on her. It wasn't just Heuermann, it was a group of men. And I believe the production of child pornography was an integral aspect to the abuse, because one of the things they would do during these occult rituals is that there would be a Polaroid camera which photographed the ritual positions and the abuse. She now has dissociative identity disorder, and she was even taken down to a river in that upstate area where they arranged rocks in the spelling of her name, a formation of a cross and RIP. And again, she was ritually assaulted and abused by these men, one of whom was Kenneth Heuermann. Another interesting part of this is one of the men who abused her and was part of this like satanic ritual abuse ring was actually a man who dressed in a police uniform or a security guard's uniform. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And what Lena says, we could back up. But Kenneth Heuermann lived in Merrick, Long Island. That's in Nassau County. So is Massapequa Park. They're a 15-minute drive, one from the other, along Sunrise Highway, the main highway on the south shore of Long Island. They're first cousins. The chances that they interacted with one another are overwhelmingly likely. Mm-hmm. And although Rex Heuermann was a Roman Catholic, at least in name, this other fellow was a Lutheran pastor. But with the ecumenical movement of the 1960s, they would have been right there together, no problem. Mm-hmm. So we also made connections of Rex Heuermann with certain abusers in the Catholic Church, mm-hmm. and that. I mean, Lena can also address some of that, but keep in mind that when Shannon Gilbert runs from Joseph Brewer's house, Joseph Brewer was the John who had hired her allegedly for that night. When she runs, she bolts from his home in terrible fear and screams. The very first place she goes is next door and pounds on the door, and you can hear that. And then she goes on the tape. Then she runs to the next house. The doors she knocked on belonged to a Catholic priest of great significance in the Roman Catholic hierarchy in America. And his name was Alan Plaka, Monsignor Plaka. Now, Plaka was accused of living with his lover and having done sexual things to boys. And he goes on. He goes to the town of, I guess it would be Oyster Bay. He goes to the town and says he wants a reduction in his taxes. He files for a tax reduction because Shannon Gilbert sought help at his house. Mm-hmm. Of course, we never hear the help he ever gave, if any. And one has to wonder what he was doing there and when. But that connection exists. Mm-hmm. The connection, Heuermann's family is very highly connected with the Catholic Church. One aunt of his was a Sister of Mercy, I believe, mm-hmm. who taught in Hicksville Holy Trinity Diocesan High School for 30 years, where she was supervised by a principal named Father Robordo, who was also got his wings, so to speak, as a priest, I believe, in either Massapequa or the Massapequa Park parish. So did Plaka. And Plaka is the best friend of Rudolph Giuliani. Giuliani, wow. Reasons unexplained, showed up at the Heuermann house and was filmed there when the bust took place with the police. And nobody ever explained his reasons for being there. Mm-hmm. But this fellow, anyway, Plaka, was also the man instrumental in making the Catholic Church wealthy in America by forming an insurance company for Catholics. And so he was widely regarded and treated like a prince in the church. And it turned out that this corruption existed. Father Robordo went to jail for his sex abuse of boys and possibly of girls, I'm not sure. And he was Plaka's buddy. Mm-hmm. So, what are these? These are circumstantial, more coincidences, right? but are they connected in some way? Are these things looped together in some way that somebody with a good investigative mind will look into? I would hope so. You were going to say.
Yeah, and there's another interesting part to this whole Placa Giuliani nexus as well. As we have Shannon's notebook, and she would list sometimes like clients that she would be seeing. One of those clients, I believe, to be a former partner in Giuliani's law firm. So
Wow.
Placa right next door, one of her clients is a partner at Giuliani's law firm. It's pretty ridiculous. And Placa himself was very instrumental in like legally constructing the way that the Catholic Church can sort of undermine like victims' claims to.
They do it all the time. Spotlight's a perfect example. They did it over the whole country. They paid out hundreds of millions of dollars rather than admit any guilt. And it's probably the richest church globally. I mean,
well, Placa was actually assigned to go around to visit with the accusers and try to talk them out of the lawsuits. That was his job, amongst others. So you start to see the connections of all this, and you can see why we think Heuermann is somewhat connected to this. We also have the same taxi cab driver who actually observed Shannon Gilbert and Heuermann in the Sayville Motor Lodge, which is on Sunrise Highway in Suffolk County, on an evening, and Shannon bolted out of there and went into the cab driver's car to get away from Heuermann. So we do know that there is, if we accept her, and certainly Rodney had accepted her as credible, Rodney Harrison, the commissioner, we do have a connection. So when people say to me, well, what are you looking into this? What does it have to do with Shannon Gilbert? It has everything to do with Shannon Gilbert. There's much more here than we need to find out more.
Right. Just that whole place is just redolent with corruption and like sexual abuse or something. It's crazy. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say one more thing because I feel like your audience is going to be pretty keen to this. Two things really. Victoria Heuermann volunteered at a Best Friends Animal Society partnered shelter called Louie. Yep. And you'd be surprised how many times Best Friends Animal Society comes up in this case and other cases we've been working.
Really? Oh my God. No, you're talking to the right audience. I would say beyond keen. Like there's probably 10 people just scribbling like, what the hell? Best Friends, no.
There's military industrial complex connections too. Rex's dad, Theodore Heuermann. Rex in an interview mentioned that his dad was an aerospace satellite engineer. And for the longest time, I was trying to verify that. I could find a tombstone where it said he was an Air Force second lieutenant, which wasn't especially notable. I think that's like one of the lowest ranks for being in the Air Force. But I did find an old classified Apollo project manual that was only distributed to a few external distributees. One of those people was Theodore Heuermann, and he was listed as being employed by Grumman Aircraft and Bethpage and MIT. Yeah, and I believe it's the uncle, George Heuermann. He attended the FBI Academy. There's pictures of him with J. Edgar Hoover and Dwight Eisenhower. He was basically the number 2 cop in Nassau County, right under Deputy Police Commissioner Francis Looney at the time.
Unbelievable. This is incredible. The connections are off the charts.
Yeah, the Looney family from Bethpage are quite a presence in Nassau County history. They were great, and there's no implication about them whatsoever in this. They were fantastic people, but they were also very, very well connected with the Roman Catholic Church, and it may be strings pulled through that system that Heuermann, got the connections he did, not because of anything the Loonies did, but because of Heuermann's father's connections.
Wow, incredible. Really incredible. And you don't know what some of these guys are doing offsite, and how does he get his money? What's he doing? Does he filming stuff? I mean, who knows?
If you look at the latest bail application from the district attorney, some of the supplies Heuermann lists are film. After the event occurs, he says dispose of pics. We also know he had a pretty extensive snuff film collection dating back to the early 90s. And I suppose it's relatively easy for deviant, degenerate people to access snuff films and torture films on the dark web these days, but back in the early 90s, that you'd have to know somebody, and he had quite the collection. And if you know anything about snuff porn, which you do, and I'm sure your audience does too, oftentimes these like pedophile and serial killer networks are intricately involved in the production and sale of these type of things. Again, it's, you know, informed speculation, but it's certainly a possibility.
And Heuermann had, when we looked at his returns and saw all the monies that he was making, you say, well, where did this monies go? We also noticed that records showed he was a heavy gambler. So was his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of their alibis is that the family was in Atlantic City for vacation. Interesting vacation for two children, huh? During the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. So there are in Las Vegas. They had a condo of some sort out in Las Vegas. So you know, there's a gambling aspect here. There's you know, wasting of money on sex workers, which are can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, $500,000 a pop, right? So I mean, it's
BDSM is extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you know, maybe he was in need of money a lot, and you know, I would look down that road of snuff filmmaking because that's very lucrative. Snuff films can cost an awful lot of money. And if he was really hungry for money, as it seems he was, there's a good chance he's making snuff films and selling them. So there would be other people out there in the dark web universe who would know about this. Speaking of Atlantic City, when the district attorney announced that the Heuermann family had an alibi, a solid alibi for when Maureen Brainerd Barnes was killed or disappeared rather, because they had checked into a hotel in Atlantic City during the time she disappeared, and there's records to prove it, and he produced the record to prove it in the papers. He said that cleaned the slate for the Heuermann family. But we did a little investigating on that, and the bill that was produced by the district attorney was a monthly bill for Rex Heuermann for Bank of America. And on it, it said in a very unusual place in an entry that I've asked other people about, we've checked, they've never seen before. It would have the word arrival printed on the bill for a date, arrival date, you know, July 6th, and then arrival date at these different hotels that they stayed at. They were timeshare hotels, by the way. And so there was this bill that said arrival July 6th. Maureen Brainerd Barnes disappears on July 9th. And so they were in Atlantic City, so they couldn't have been around when all this happened. That may be true. But also, we called the hotel. And I, Lena, and two other eyewitnesses spoke to the manager at the hotel, the night manager, about how people's, you know, system, how the system works to record when people come and go. And she said she had never heard of a bill that showed arrival time on a Bank of America bill. But regardless, she went onto the computer herself while we were sitting there, and they still had the records in the computer. And Mrs. Heuermann and children arrived on July 17th. They weren't gone in Atlantic City on July 6th at this hotel, as they had claimed. And remember, the DA Tierney said the reason he believed that they had this alibi was because of the bill that turned out not to be correct in the arrival column, as it were, and it actually showed the actual arrival date on the computer. And also, he claimed that he knew that because he spoke with Mrs. Ellerup, and she told him that. Not very good for that purpose, I would suggest. And this needed further inquiry. So we brought this out at the symposium that we held on January 30th at St. John's University. We brought out this fact. The district attorney had no comment about it, and the two lawyers for the Heuermanns for Ellerup and Heuermann's, Macedonio and Matev, both said, "Oh, John Ray's making it all up. We'll prove it. He's a liar." And we, I don't know how many more days we're now.
Still waiting
To hear from them
Gotcha.
on that point. So,
can you tell me more about the symposium? I'm not familiar with that. Is it recorded? Can people watch the video?
yes, we did a poor job. I must have. Unfortunately, St. John's didn't have the facility for what we were doing, but it's live streamed by us, and there the voices are you can hear them, but you got to work at it a little bit.
Okay.
It's also live streamed by somebody else that was a better quality,
slightly better audio quality. I can link you to it.
Okay.
At certain parts it can be a little hard to listen to, but yeah, we did a symposium at the beginning of the year, sort of discussing all of the reasons why we can reasonably believe that Shannon Gilbert was murdered, and presented some of these new affidavits that I shared with you over email too.
Right, and like these bodies were cut up, right? Like they were really brutalized. It wasn't like some. And the burlap bag too is also kind of the hunting tie-in, right? So
yeah, they were bound too in the way that a hunter would bind an animal. I believe the wrists and ankles would be taped together, how a hunter would bind a deer.
Oh, and somebody suggested to us that Shannon's hyoid bone had been broken as if she had been strangled. But one of the things we noticed when I attended the autopsy with Dr. Bodden when we did the autopsy of Shannon's bones. The hyoid bone had a hole right through the center of the bone, and it was inexplicable why it was there. So somebody suggested, could it have been an arrow, since we had found arrow points laying around and behind Dr. Hackett's home in the marsh. And so we investigated that, and we measured the circumference of the hole, and there are arrows that could fit that. We never said that she was killed by an arrow. We said that was somebody speculated on that. It's a reasonable question, and we don't know more than that. We never said that she was shot in the throat by an arrow. And the people that are going around bad mouthing us are saying that. We never said it. It's absurd. But there were arrows found in and around the area where she was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that the major media kind of quashed your most recent press conference? Because I did see there was an article in Newsweek that covered a lot of your pictures. But do you feel what's your thoughts about the response to the kind of corporate media to your investigation?
Much of the media attended the press conference, and almost none of the major channels showed it after they attended it. I believe there was some kind of corporate level decisions made not to show it. That's their choice. But today, the major media is not the great power it once was. It's still extremely powerful. But the independent podcasters like yourself and others are doing an end run around the information that gets quashed, and they're able to produce it. So my press conference, our press conference, was produced in full by more than one channel and by us as well, and we've made it available to other people. So yeah, Newsday did an article, but not much of one, and the others ignored us. So
I'll just say something about Newsday real quick. The family that owns Newsday, one of the scions of that family has a rather interesting connection to possible crimes as well. A body known as Cherries washed up upon the Dolan estate. It's a woman who is dismembered and left inside a suitcase.
There was another death associated. Can you say that again? I was reading the comments.
It's completely tangential, but in a suitcase, a woman's dismembered body actually washed ashore onto the estate of the Dolans, who own News.
Wow. Oh wow. Oh, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, that whole place is just...
Yeah, there's so many unidentified bodies, too, all throughout Long Island, in Lynbrook, and it goes back a long time.
There's a hunting connection. I always speculated back in the beginning of the investigation that there's a hunting element in this, long before we knew of Rex Heuermann. and long before we knew of anybody for that matter who would have done this. And I said it seemed to me that there was a hunting aspect to it. Partly I believe that, and still do, because when Shannon is first heard on the tape, the very first thing she says after she identifies herself is, "Someone is after me. Someone is after me." She's being hunted. She's being hunted down. And we've made all kinds of assumptions about, we meaning myself, the police, everybody else, about what the tape means. But it needs to be the 911 tape, the new, looked at a different prism. Did she actually come from outside the house and run into it to hide out because someone was after her? These are new aspects, but there's hunting involved. And sure enough, Rex Heuermann emerges as we had predicted, a hunter. And he's big in hunting. And we know that he attended 3 hunting events within 2 weeks of each other, according to the district attorney's release of his notebook. So he's training kids how to shoot in a picture that we have. And so that, he's a joiner. And I said that back in July 15th, 14th, July 14th of last year, that he's a joiner. He's gregarious. He's boisterous. That's how he makes a living. He joins groups. So that one of the trains of investigation that should take place is to look at the groups he's joined, because he's going to join legitimate groups and illegitimate groups. And the illegitimate groups he's going to find in BDSM parlors and on the dark web.
Right. I mean, incredible. Just incredible. I mean, there's so much more to research too, but the kind of hunting thing is, I think, really important. Like, and you said, I think it was Gary Brucato said, there's an aspect to his thinking of like making it exciting, like he was intellectualizing it. So maybe he got bored, like the standard kind of hunting thing, and then it became like the most dangerous game or something. I don't know.
Well, he seems to enjoy. We know also he had a worker at his office, a woman who went on a cruise into the ocean and the Caribbean, I believe, and she told him about it, and she says that he said to her, "Well, don't worry, no matter where you are, I can always find you," and it gave her an eerie feeling. And then she forgot about it, went on the cruise, and after she was out on the cruise in the middle of the ocean somewhere, an envelope was slipped under her door, and it said something to the effect of, "See, I told you so." Wow. So he really enjoyed hunting. And we have an interesting connection between Rex and survivalists.
What's that?
Well, survivalists are people who believe that the world is going to be, in a crisis, coming to an end, nuclear war, that kind of thing. And so there's a whole movement of these people, and they organize and they talk to each other and so forth, and they train in survivalist methods, staying alive, and that sort of thing. So they go into the woods and into the marshes, and they build little huts, and they learn how to live off the land, that kind of thing, and they learn how to hunt. And one of the items that was seized by the police that's on their inventory list the first time they went in were survivalist goods or survivalist items. And it turns out that Dr. Peter Hackett, under oath, testified that he ran a survivalist organization called Survivalist Dynamics, that he ran along with a sea captain, a person who was in charge of pleasure boats, had graduated from Merchant Marine Academy here on Long Island. And so it's an interesting, again, coincidences needs to be looked into.
Just a juicy little tidbit about that guy too, who ran the Survivalist Dynamics company with Peter Hackett. He, I believe his father or grandfather was the Grand Mason of the East Coast. And it seems like the grandfather literally named himself after the Count in The Most Dangerous Game.
Get out. Oh, wow. So it's like running in families. Like that's the whole crazy.
Might very well be, but
yeah.
And
family that hunts and kills together stays together, something weird like that. I mean, it's like almost like that. Like that's speculation. I don't have a lot of proof, but there's a lot of.
By the way, we didn't, you can see that Lena and others here who are working with me are doing a fabulous job of helping out and investigating all of this, and we're putting together quite a bit of information, the dossier of witnesses and the like. I think we're fully committed to one another in what we know and what we believe. We brought others in, like Rodney, when he made an announcement on the media in October of last year, and he said, if you don't want to talk to the police, if you're afraid to, if you have any other reason you don't want to come to them directly, call John Ray. So I've had a number of prominent people who have been very supportive of the work I'm doing all these years, and Rodney's one of them. And Dr. Bricado, he's Gary Bricado. He's been another friend and helper that we've interacted with and exchanged information and the like for almost a year, not quite, and over the years. But we don't say Rodney Harrison agrees with all of our theories, and because he knows us and has helped us, we don't say that about Dr. Bricado either. He's a great guy, and he really helped us with understanding the mindset, the psyches of the serial killers, and of possibly the people in this case. That's where we don't graft him into our group and say he's part of our group. He's not.
Gotcha. Liza asks, has anyone looked into the manufacture of the burlap or hunting blind material? Also, were there more rolls of the burlap found at the house or in the storage? You guys have any knowledge of that?
I don't.
Either of you? I guess not. Maybe that's another thing to look into.
There's mixed messages about that. Again, they keep that type of information pretty close to the vest, I believe. There's been a lot of public speculation that, and this isn't necessarily coming from the police department, this is just coming from public opinion, as it were, that the burlap that some of the victims were found wrapped in could have come from Bissett's nursery. James Bissett, again, is the wealthy aquarium owner and nursery owner who killed himself shortly after Shannon's remains were found. Not much more has really come out about that, but a lot of people have speculated that because he did sell landscaper grade burlap at his nursery.
Wow.
The Dominic Perone, who was the chief of police back when Shannon was found, he called a press conference to say that Bissett was not involved, and that the internet was, they were making him into the killer, and there was no evidence of that. So he did clear that up early on. The problem was, though, that I don't know what Jim Bissett's real involvement was. However, this evidence has come to us, and one of those things is that Bissett would actually visit into a particular sex place on Long Island, where Heuermann also frequented, and they would sit at the bar next to each other. We also know that really interesting coincidence is that amongst the people in Shannon Gilbert's case who were key to what happened the early morning of May 10th, 2010, when she disappeared, those people who I interviewed or took depositions from, and I don't say they were all truthful by any means, those people, they were instrumental in giving us the circumstances of Shannon's death. Well, it turns out that one of them, Barbara Brennan, was the last person whose door Shannon knocked on. And Miss Brennan lived right next door to a family known as Aversano. Across from them lived a fellow named Canning, Thomas Canning, and his wife, who worked with Hackett's wife in a nursing, end care nursing, hospice nursing. So the Aversanos had a very beautiful home with landscaping. Thomas Canning, who claimed to, or he and his son Justin claimed to have examined the footsteps of Shannon Gilbert around Barbara Brennan's house, and his son claimed that Canning and the son met Shannon Gilbert that morning. Then he denied it later on. This Thomas Canning was a landscaper whose work was strictly for the Oak Beach community. And he's testified to this under oath. And Thomas Canning, he claimed that he was really upset with a guy named Jim Bissett, because Bissett was a wholesale nursery owner, and he would sell to retailers, like landscapers, like Thomas Canning. But Bissett himself came into the Oak Beach community and personally serviced the landscaping of the Aversanos in Oak Beach. Now, Oak Beach is this tiny little beach community. It's private community. It's out of the way, no man's land, so to speak. Who in God's name would be hanging out in Oak Beach unless you had a reason to do so? And of all the places, of all the villages and hamlets on Long Island, a wholesaler goes and competes against his own clients in a community. That's why Canning badmouthed him, Bissett, when I took his deposition. But that puts Bissett smack dab in the middle of not only the Oak Beach community, but of the cabal of people who were involved in Shannon Gilbert's disappearance that morning.
Yeah, cabal is the right word. Something weird is going on.
Yeah.
It's convenient that they made Heuermann is the guilty party, supposedly, right? Just because his hair's there, but something weird is going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You must, I'd say so. Something weird is certainly going on.
Just that whole area, it's there's a lot going on. Well, we've passed the 90-minute mark.
All right. Can I ask one thing of you, William?
Of course.
We run an organization called the Magdalene Dismas Legal Society, and it's a not-for-profit. It's a charity, and it's through Magdalene Dismas that we raise funds to try to help pay for some of the expenses, which are vast, in this investigation. And we also use it to help other poor women and men who have been basically buried alive by our society. Whether guilty or innocent is irrelevant, but we help them because of that. And it's all for free. It's all pro bono work that we do. So it's named after Mary Magdalene, who was by reputation, a sex worker. And yet she gets the privilege of standing at the foot of the cross and is the first one to see the empty grave on Easter Sunday by tradition, by the Bible. So the other person is St. Dismas, who was the good thief, as he was called, on the cross, because he asked Christ to make sure he gets to heaven, or words to that, remember him in heaven, words to that effect. And Christ
truly
said,
today you shall be with me in paradise.
You shall be, and he was the first one that would be in paradise. So think about it from the traditional point of view. A thief and a prostitute are honored in the highest echelons of the Catholic hierarchy and Christian hierarchy. And so we named it Magdalene Dismas for the people who have been bedraggled and been pressed down, or have taken the wrong turn and have been crushed by society. So we ask, if you're ever going to make any donations, we'd appreciate it if you went. And
Yeah, there's a GoFundMe link that I can circulate too. But if you just look up Magdalene Dismas GoFundMe, you'll find it.
Yeah, so it's DISMUS. Is that how you spell it?
No, Magdalene is Magdalene, and Dismas is Dismas.
Dismas. Sorry, Saint Dismas. Gotcha. So I'll put a link to that. I'll find the link. I'll put it in the show notes so people can check it out. You guys are, whether you like it or not, you've just crowdsourced your research, because there's probably like 10 people who are going to just start research grinding on all the links that you opened up. So once they get their info, where's the best place to send it to?
Yeah, info at johnraylaw.com. Yeah, anything you find, it's much appreciated.
John. And what's your take on, you sent me a lot of the marketing material. Do you mind if I redistribute that? Is that okay? Or do you want to send it out yourself?
Yeah, no, you can.
Okay, good. Okay. have a couple people send it out to. Also, I have kind of a group of people who might be interested. If you're interested in more opportunities to be a guest, I can also include you on an email.
Lovely.
And then, so the John Ray is the email is the best way to do it.
Yep.
And then I'll also put a link to your June 13th conference so people will check that out. Check out all the pictures. We didn't go through it, but people can do it on their own time. Yep. And anything else you'd like to add or anything else I missed?
There's a ton, but
There's
you don't
so
have time.
Okay, well, maybe that'll be part 2. I'm already 27 minutes past. I was supposed to do an
Okay.
interview at 4, but it doesn't matter. It's okay. I'll just reschedule. Again, sorry.
Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. I think there's a lot here. There's a lot. I mean, I think you're right. Just we're floating over the surface of things. Again, it's attorney John Ray initially got involved in the LISK case back in 2011 with the victim Shannon Gilbert, Shannan, and then his assistant Lena Ajit, Ajit, sorry. And it's John Ray, Ray. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Stay there.